The summer heat of 2010 pressed against the windows of Jason Collins's apartment in Phoenix like an unwanted memory. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the cardboard box his cousin had dropped off that morning, dusty, water-stained, sealed with packing tape that had yellowed to the color of old newspaper. "Found it in Grandma Ruth's basement," Michelle had said, avoiding his eyes. "Thought you should have it before we sell the house. It's got your parents' stuff." Jason was 41 years old. He'd been 7 the last time he saw his parents. The box had sat unopened for 3 hours while he finished his shift as a high school history teacher, graded papers, made dinner he didn't eat. Now, with the sun setting and casting long shadows across his modest living room, he finally cut through the tape with a kitchen knife. The smell hit him first, mildew and something else, something that made his throat tighten. Old paper. Forgotten time. Inside, chaos. Road maps folded wrong, their creases torn. A woman's scarf that might have been his mother's, faded blue with white flowers. Rolls of 35mm film, at least a dozen still in their canisters. A leather journal with his father's name embossed on the cover, Mark E. Collins. Jason's hands trembled as he lifted the journal. He'd spent 34 years constructing a life around the absence of answers. The official story was simple, repeated so many times it had become truth. In July 1976, the Collins family, Mark, Evelyn, and their twin 7-year-old sons Jason and Eli, had vanished somewhere along Route 66 during a summer road trip. The car, a 1974 Ford Country Squire station wagon, was never recovered. No bodies, no witnesses, no trace. Except Jason himself, found 3 days after the disappearance, wandering alone on a county road outside Amarillo, Texas, unable to remember how he'd gotten there or what had happened to his family. The doctors called it dissociative amnesia. The police called it a dead end. His grandmother called it God's will and raised him in silence about the past. Now he opened his father's journal to the first page. The handwriting was tight, methodical, the script of an engineer or an accountant. His father had been neither. Mark Collins had worked as a freelance photographer for local newspapers, the kind of man who was always chasing the next shot, the next story. June 1st, 1976. Something's wrong in Tucumcari. Sheriff's Department running protection for someone, maybe multiple someones. Saw 3 separate payoffs at the diner on Main Street. Different officers, different envelopes. All from the same man in the gray Cadillac. Jason flipped through page after page. His father's observations grew more detailed, more urgent. Names of small towns along Route 66, Tucumcari, Santa Rosa, Klein's Corners, Moriarty. Names of people, Sheriff Dale Brennan, Deputy Frank Weston, a businessman called Mr. Cordero, another simply referred to as the developer. June 14th, 1976. Evelyn says I'm putting the family at risk. She's right, but this is bigger than I thought. These aren't just small-time payoffs. This is organized. Land deals, construction contracts, federal highway funds being diverted. If I can document this properly, it could be the story that changes everything. Jason's heart pounded. A story. His father hadn't been taking them on a vacation. He'd been investigating something using the road trip as cover. He set the journal aside and reached for the film canisters. Each was labeled with a date and location in his father's precise handwriting. July 3rd, 1976, July 5th, July 7th. The last one was dated July 10th, 1976, 2 days before they disappeared. He grabbed his phone and searched for photo labs that could develop old film. It was nearly 9 at night, but he found a specialty shop in Tempe that advertised vintage film processing. He'd drive there first thing in the morning. Beneath the film canisters, he found the maps. His father had marked them extensively, circles around certain towns, routes highlighted in different colors, notations in the margins. Red marks seemed to indicate locations of interest. Blue marks showed their planned route, but there were green marks too, off the main highway leading to remote locations Jason couldn't identify. One map had a small town circled multiple times in red ink. Esperanza, New Mexico. Population 847. His father had written beside it, "The center. Everything connects here." Jason had never heard of Esperanza. At the bottom of the box, beneath everything else, he found an envelope. It was addressed to the Federal Bureau of Investigation Field Office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The stamp had never been canceled. The envelope had never been sent. His hands shook as he carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed on what must have been his father's old typewriter. "To whom it may concern. My name is Mark Edward Collins. I am a photojournalist currently documenting what I believe to be a widespread corruption network operating along U.S. Route 66 in New Mexico and West Texas. Over the past 6 weeks, I have photographed and documented systematic bribery involving law enforcement officials, county administrators, and private developers. I have evidence of the following. 1. Sheriff's departments in at least 4 counties accepting regular payments in exchange for non-enforcement of building codes and zoning laws. 2. Fraudulent land transfers totaling an estimated $2 million in federal highway expansion funds. 3. Intimidation and possible violence against local residents who oppose development projects. I am prepared to turn over all photographs, recordings, and documentation to your office. However, I have reason to believe I am being followed. I have changed our route twice, and each time, the same vehicle appears within 24 hours. A gray 1975 Cadillac Eldorado, New Mexico plates, driven by a man I believe to be connected to a businessman named Cordero. If something happens to my family, please know that copies of this evidence have been secured in a location known only to me and one other person. The safety of my wife and children is my primary concern. I can be reached through the following route, beginning July 12, 1976. The letter ended there. No signature. No contact information. No description of the route or the location of the evidence. July 12, 1976, was the day they vanished. Jason read the letter 3 more times, his mind racing. His father had known he was in danger. He'd been planning to contact the FBI, and he'd mentioned one other person who knew about the evidence. Who? Not his mother. The journal made it clear Evelyn had wanted Mark to stop the investigation. Not Jason or Eli. They'd been 7 years old. So who had his father trusted? Jason pulled out his laptop and began searching. Esperanza, New Mexico corruption 1976. Route 66 land fraud. Cordero developer, New Mexico. The search results were sparse. A few historical society mentions of Esperanza as a mining town that had declined in the 1960s, a reference to a Route 66 revival project in the mid-1970s that had brought some investment to struggling towns along the highway. Nothing about corruption or fraud. But then, buried in a digitized newspaper archive from the Albuquerque Journal, he found something. A small article from August 1976. Esperanza businessman dies in vehicle accident. Esperanza, NM, local businessman Victor Cordero, 52, died Tuesday when his vehicle left County Road 117 and struck a tree. Authorities say excessive speed and possible mechanical failure were factors in the crash. Cordero was a prominent figure in local development projects and had recently... The article was cut off. The newspaper archive ended mid-sentence. Jason sat back, his mind spinning. Cordero had died less than 2 months after Jason's family disappeared. A car accident. How convenient. He looked at his father's maps again, focusing on the green marks, the locations off the main route. One of them was circled heavily, with a notation. Safe house. Use only if compromised. The location was in the Sandia Mountains, east of Albuquerque, on a remote forest road that didn't even have a name on the map. Just a set of coordinates. 35. 2089 degree N, 106, 3919 W. Jason entered the coordinates into Google Maps. The satellite image showed dense forest and what might be the ruins of an old structure. No roads led directly to it. It would require hiking in. His phone buzzed. A text message from Michelle. "Did you open the box? Call me when you can." He dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Jason, I need to tell you something," she said without greeting. Her voice was tight, anxious. "That box. Grandma Ruth told me not to give it to you. She made me promise to throw it away." "Why?" "She said it would only hurt you, that the past should stay buried." "Michelle, did Grandma Ruth ever talk about what really happened? Did she know something?" A long pause. "I think she did. Last year, before the dementia got really bad, she said something strange to me. She said, 'Sometimes the kindest lie is letting someone believe they were left behind.'" Jason's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but Jason, there's something else. A man came to the house last month before Grandma went into care. He was asking about your father's belongings. He said he was from the Historical Society, doing research on Route 66, but something felt off. Grandma refused to talk to him and called the police. He left before they arrived." "Did you get his name?" "No, but he was old, maybe 70 or 75. He walked with a cane, and he had a scar across his left cheek like someone had cut him a long time ago." Jason's eyes went to the journal entry mentioning Deputy Frank Weston. His father had described Weston as having a knife scar on his face from a bar fight in '68. "Michelle, I need you to remember, did this man say anything else? Anything at all?" "Just one thing. When Grandma shut the door on him, I heard him say through the screen, 'She should have stayed gone, he should have let it stay buried.' I didn't understand what he meant." Jason understood perfectly. Someone knew his mother had survived. Someone knew the disappearance hadn't been what it seemed. And that someone was still watching, still waiting, still protecting whatever secret had been buried with his family 34 years ago. Jason didn't sleep. He spent the night cross-referencing his father's journal entries with online archives, building a timeline of those final weeks in the summer of 1976. By dawn, he had filled 3 pages of his own notebook with names, dates, and connections that formed a web of corruption his father had been documenting. At 7 a.m., he was standing outside Retro Film Lab in Tempe when the owner, a man in his 60s named Carl, unlocked the door. "You're eager," Carl said, eyeing the shoebox full of film canisters Jason carried. "These are from 1976. They've never been developed. Is that a problem?" Carl took one of the canisters, held it up to the light, and examined it carefully. "Depends on how they were stored. Heat and humidity are the enemy, but if they've been in a cool, dry place." He looked at Jason with renewed interest. "What's on these?" "I don't know yet. That's what I need to find out. This'll take a few days. Old film requires careful processing, and I'll need to test a frame or two first to determine the right development time. I'll pay extra for rush service." Carl named a price that made Jason wince, but he agreed without hesitation. He couldn't wait days. Whatever was on those photographs might finally explain what had happened to his family. "I'll call you tomorrow afternoon," Carl said. "Meanwhile, don't get your hopes up too high. 34-year-old film is unpredictable." Jason left the shop and drove east, toward the Sandia Mountains. The coordinates from his father's map pulled at him like a magnetic force. If there had been a safe house, if his father had hidden evidence there, it might still exist. The drive took 2 hours. The paved roads gave way to dirt, then to barely visible trails. Jason parked his Honda Civic at the end of a Forest Service road and continued on foot, using his phone's GPS to guide him. The New Mexico morning was already hot, the sun burning through the pine trees. Jason climbed steadily, following game trails when he could, pushing through brush when he couldn't. His dress shoes from yesterday were completely wrong for hiking, but he hadn't gone home to change. The need to know drove him forward. After 40 minutes of climbing, he found it. It wasn't much, just the remains of an old hunting cabin, mostly collapsed, its roof caved in and its walls weathered to gray. But it was exactly where his father's coordinates had indicated. Jason approached carefully, aware that the structure might be unstable. The door hung from one hinge. Inside, everything was decay and abandonment. A rusted bed frame, a table with 3 legs, shattered glass from windows that no longer existed. But in the corner, beneath what had once been a built-in shelf, Jason saw something that made his heart race. A metal lockbox covered in dirt and pine needles but intact. He pulled it out, brushed it off. It was locked, but the mechanism was old and corroded. A few minutes of work with a rock broke it open. Inside, more photographs, these already developed. Jason's hands trembled as he looked through them. His father had been thorough. There were dozens of images showing men exchanging envelopes outside diners, municipal buildings, and construction sites. License plates were visible in several shots. In one particularly damning photograph, a man in a sheriff's uniform accepted a thick envelope from a man in an expensive suit beside a gray Cadillac. Jason turned the photo over. His father had written on the back, Sheriff Brennan plus Cordero, July 8, 1976, Santa Rosa. There were more photographs. Construction equipment at sites that appeared to be on protected federal land, documents being signed in the back rooms of restaurants, and then photographs that made Jason's breath catch. His family. His mother, Evelyn, standing beside their station wagon at a gas station, smiling at the camera. His brother Eli and himself as children, eating ice cream cones, their faces sticky and happy. A motel sign, Desert Star Motor Lodge, Tucumcari. These weren't surveillance photos. These were family snapshots mixed in with the evidence. His father had been living two lives simultaneously, devoted family man and undercover investigator. At the bottom of the lockbox, Jason found a tape recorder and 3 cassette tapes, labeled with dates. He had no way to play them here, but he carefully placed everything back in the box and secured it. As he prepared to leave, something caught his eye. Carved into the wooden wall, barely visible beneath decades of grime, were initials. MC plus DH 71176. MC was obviously Mark Collins, but who was DH? Jason photographed the carving with his phone, then made his way back down the mountain. By the time he reached his car, he had a voicemail from Carl at the film lab. Mr. Collins, you need to come back to the shop. Today. As soon as possible. I've developed test frames from 3 of your rolls and... Just come in. Don't call me back. Come in person. The drive back to Tempe felt like it took hours. Jason's mind raced with possibilities. What had Carl seen? The film lab was closed when Jason arrived, despite it being only 2 in the afternoon. He knocked, and Carl appeared from the back room, looking pale. He unlocked the door and pulled Jason inside, immediately locking it again. I don't want to be involved in whatever this is, Carl said, his hands shaking slightly. But I think you need to see these before I hand them over to you. He led Jason to the back room where photographs hung drying on a line. They were his father's images, now brought to light after 34 years in darkness. The first row showed the corruption his father had documented, clear evidence of bribery, illegal land deals, and official misconduct. But it was the second row that had frightened Carl. Jason stepped closer, his pulse pounding in his ears. The photographs showed violence. A man lying on the ground, blood pooling beneath him, outside what looked like a construction trailer. Another image showed 2 men dragging something, or someone, wrapped in a tarp toward a concrete foundation. A third showed a freshly poured concrete slab, smooth and innocent looking, except for the date stamp visible on construction equipment in the frame. July 1976. Jesus Christ, Jason whispered. That's not all, Carl said quietly. He pointed to another photograph, this one showing 3 men talking beside a truck. I enlarged this one because the focus was sharp. Look at the license plate. Jason leaned in. The plate was clearly visible. New Mexico, 1976, number JTK 447. I did some research, Carl continued, his voice barely above a whisper. That plate was registered to the Valencia County Sheriff's Department in 1976. That's an official vehicle, and those men. He pointed to the figures in the photograph. That's a body bag they're loading. Jason felt dizzy. His father hadn't just been documenting corruption. He'd witnessed murder. There's one more thing, Carl said. He handed Jason a photograph that was different from the others. The image quality was poor, taken in low light, but it showed the interior of a vehicle. The station wagon. Jason's family car. In the photograph taken from outside through the window, Jason could see his mother in the passenger seat. She was turned around, talking to someone in the back seat. But her expression wasn't one of fear or distress. She looked determined, almost defiant. And in the driver's seat, barely visible in the shadows, was not his father. It was a woman. Dark hair, strong features, approximately his mother's age. "Who the hell is that?" Jason asked. Carl shook his head. "I was hoping you could tell me. This was on the last roll, the one dated July 10th, 2 days before your family disappeared." Jason stared at the photograph, his mind reeling. Nothing made sense. If his father was taking the picture, who was driving their car? Who was the woman? And why did his mother look like she was having a normal conversation instead of being kidnapped or in danger? His phone rang. Unknown number. Jason answered, his voice unsteady. "Hello? Jason Collins?" The voice was male, elderly, with a rasp of age and cigarettes. "Who is this?" "Someone who knew your father. Someone who tried to warn him to stop digging. He didn't listen." A pause. "I see you're following in his footsteps. That's a mistake." "How did you get this number?" "I've been watching you since yesterday. You went to your grandmother's house. You went to the film lab. You went to the mountains. You're looking for answers, but you don't understand what you're stirring up." Jason's blood ran cold. "You're the man who went to my grandmother's house, the one with the scar." A dry laugh. "Frank Weston, former deputy, Valencia County Sheriff's Department. Though I suppose former is generous. I was forced out in 1979 for asking too many questions about what happened to your family." "What did happen to my family?" "That's the wrong question. The right question is, who decided they needed to disappear, and why did your mother agree?" "What are you talking about?" "Your father was a threat, Mr. Collins. He documented crimes that, if exposed, would have sent powerful men to prison. But your mother, she was the real problem, because she knew something your father didn't. She knew who was really behind everything." "Who?" "Meet me tonight, 10 p.m. There's a diner in Moriarty, off the old route, called the Sunset Cafe. It's the only place I trust to talk. Come alone, bring the photographs and the journal, and I'll tell you what really happened on July 12th, 1976. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" "You don't. But I'm 78 years old with stage 4 lung cancer. I've got 3 months to live, maybe less. I don't have a reason to lie anymore, and I'm tired of carrying secrets for men who are already dead." Weston's voice softened slightly. "Your father was a good man. He deserved better than what happened. So did your brother." "What about my mother?" "Your mother made a choice, whether it was the right one or that's for you to decide." The line went dead. Jason stood frozen. The phone still pressed to his ear. Carl was watching him with obvious concern. "Everything okay?" "No," Jason said honestly. "Nothing is okay." He gathered all the photographs, carefully placing them back in the developer's envelopes. He paid Carl, thanked him, and left. The drive to Moriarty would take about 4 hours. That gave Jason time to go home, collect the journal and the evidence from the lockbox, and prepare for whatever revelation Frank Weston had to offer. But first, he needed to know something. He pulled out his phone and searched for DH New Mexico 1976 Route 66. The results were sparse, but one caught his attention. A newspaper article from July 1976 archived in the Albuquerque Journal. Investigative journalist recognized for corruption series Albuquerque. Reporter Diana Hartley of the Santa Fe New Mexican received recognition this week for her ongoing series investigating land fraud and political corruption in rural New Mexico counties. Hartley, 34, has been documenting irregularities in federal highway fund distribution and... The article continued, but Jason had seen enough. Diana Hartley. DH. His father hadn't been working alone. And somehow Jason knew with absolute certainty Diana Hartley was the woman driving their station wagon in that photograph. She was the one other person who knew where the evidence was hidden. She was the key to everything. But where was she now? And why had she been in their car, in their family vehicle, 2 days before they all vanished? Jason pulled up a more recent search, Diana Hartley, journalist, New Mexico. The most recent result made his heart stop. Diana Hartley, acclaimed investigative journalist, died by suicide in 1977, age 35. Services private. 1 year after his family disappeared, the woman who had been working with his father was dead. The official cause? Suicide. Jason didn't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. He pointed his car east toward Moriarty, toward answers that had been buried for 34 years. Whatever Frank Weston had to tell him, whatever truth had been hidden, Jason was finally going to learn what had really happened on Route 66 in the summer of 1976, and he was going to find out why his mother had agreed to disappear and who she had left behind. The Sunset Cafe sat like a forgotten relic on the edge of Moriarty, its neon sign flickering weakly against the darkening New Mexico sky. Jason arrived 20 minutes early, parking his car where he could watch the entrance. The diner looked exactly like something from 1976. Vinyl booths, chrome trim, a counter with rotating stools. Through the windows he could see only 3 customers and a tired-looking waitress refilling coffee. Jason checked his phone. No service. Of course. This part of Route 66 was notorious for dead zones. He'd spent the drive preparing himself for this moment, but now that it was here, doubt crept in. What if this was a setup? What if Frank Weston wasn't who he claimed to be? Jason had brought copies of the photographs and journal entries, leaving the originals locked in a safe deposit box he'd rented that afternoon at a bank in Albuquerque. If something happened to him, at least the evidence would survive. At 9:55 p.m., a battered pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. The man who emerged moved slowly, leaning heavily on a cane. Even in the dim light, Jason could see the scar running down his left cheek, a pale line that caught the glow from the diner's windows. Frank Weston was tall, or had been before age bent his spine. He wore jeans, a denim shirt, and a jacket too heavy for the warm night. As he approached the diner entrance, his eyes scanned the parking lot with the practiced awareness of someone who'd spent a lifetime looking over his shoulder. Jason waited until Weston was inside before following. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Weston had taken a corner booth, positioning himself with his back to the wall and a clear view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. Old habits. "Mr. Collins," Weston said as Jason slid into the booth across from him. Up close, the man looked even older than his 78 years. His skin had the gray pallor of serious illness, and when he breathed, Jason could hear a faint wheeze. "You came alone. Good." "I didn't have much choice. You're the only person who claims to know what happened." The waitress approached. Her name tag read Dolores, and took their orders without interest. Coffee for both. Jason wasn't hungry, and Weston looked like he hadn't had an appetite in months. When Dolores walked away, Weston leaned forward. "Before we start, I need to see what you found. The journal. The photographs." Jason hesitated, then pulled out the envelope containing copies. Weston went through them methodically, his weathered hands steady despite his obvious frailty. When he came to the photograph of the body being loaded into the sheriff's vehicle, his jaw tightened. "Bobby Cisneros," Weston said quietly. "Local activist who opposed the Route 66 expansion project, claimed it was going to destroy historic Pueblo sites. He disappeared in June 1976. They said he probably got drunk and wandered into the desert." He tapped the photograph. "This is what really happened. My father documented a murder." "Your father documented multiple murders, Mr. Collins. Bobby Cisneros was just the first one I knew about." Weston set the photographs aside. "But that's not why your family disappeared. The murders were part of a bigger operation, and your father stumbled into something even the people committing the crimes didn't fully understand." Dolores returned with coffee. Both men waited until she was out of earshot before continuing. "Start at the beginning," Jason said. "Tell me everything." Weston added 3 sugars to his coffee with shaking hands. 1974. That's when it started. though we didn't know it at the time. The federal government announced a major initiative to preserve and revitalize Route 66. Millions in funding for restoration, tourism development, historical preservation. Small towns all along the route saw it as salvation. Most of these places were dying, young people leaving, businesses closing. The highway money was supposed to change everything. And someone saw an opportunity. Several someones. Victor Cordero was the front man, businessman, developer, connected to political figures in Santa Fe and Washington. But behind him was a network. Contractors, county officials, law enforcement. They figured out how to skim money from every project. Ghost companies, inflated contracts, kickbacks. They were stealing millions and nobody was watching closely enough to notice. Jason sipped his coffee. It was terrible, burnt and bitter. Until my father started paying attention. Mark wasn't looking for corruption initially. He was a photographer, doing a project on small-town America. But he was observant, and he started noticing patterns. Money flowing through towns that should have been broke. Construction on federal land that didn't match the official permits. He started asking questions. Anne met Diana Hartley. Weston's eyes sharpened. You found out about Diana? Good. Yes, she was already investigating the corruption from a different angle. She'd been tracking suspicious land deals for the Santa Fe New Mexican. When she and Mark connected, they realized they'd both stumbled onto the same network. They decided to work together, pool their evidence. What happened to her? The obituary said suicide. That's what they called it. Weston's voice was flat. Diana Hartley was thrown off a bridge in Albuquerque in March 1977, made to look like she jumped. I saw the police report. There were bruises on her arms consistent with being grabbed, but the medical examiner ruled it a suicide anyway. Nobody wanted to look too closely. Jason felt sick. Who killed her? The same people who made your family disappear. But here's what you need to understand. Diana's death came after your family vanished. It was retaliation, punishment for what Mark had set in motion. I don't understand. If my family disappeared in July 1976 and Diana died in March 1977, how was her death retaliation? Weston pulled out a photograph from his jacket pocket. It was old, creased, but the image was clear. It showed a woman in her 30s with dark hair and intense eyes, standing beside a camera on a tripod. Diana Hartley. Because, Weston said, Diana was supposed to disappear too. The plan was for all of them to vanish together. Your father, your mother, Diana, and the twins. But something went wrong. Jason's world tilted. What are you talking about? Let me back up. By July 1976, your father and Diana had enough evidence to bring down the entire network. Photographs, financial documents, recorded conversations. They knew they were being followed, knew they were in danger. They went to the FBI field office in Albuquerque and tried to hand over the evidence. You found the letter your father tried to send, but what you don't know is that he'd already made contact with an agent named Philip Morrison. What happened? Morrison was dirty. He was on Cordero's payroll. As soon as Mark and Diana approached him, Morrison warned Cordero. Suddenly, your father and Diana weren't just dealing with local corruption. They were facing people with federal connections, people who could make entire families disappear without consequence. Jason's hands were shaking. He set his coffee cup down before he spilled it. So they ran. They planned to run. Diana had contacts with journalists in Washington, people she trusted. The plan was to get the evidence out of New Mexico, get somewhere safe, and then release everything simultaneously to multiple news outlets. They couldn't be silenced if the story was already public. The safe house in the mountains, Jason said. That's where they were going to hide. Weston nodded. Diana arranged it. An old family property, off the grid. The plan was for your father and mother to take you boys there, while Diana drove ahead to Santa Fe to retrieve some final documents from her office. Then she'd join you, and you'd all head to Washington together. But that's not what happened. No. Weston's voice grew heavy. July 11th, 1976. Your family stopped for gas at a station outside Tucumcari, while your father was inside paying Two men approached your mother at the car. They weren't threatening, just talking. When your father came out, the men were gone. But your mother was pale, shaking. She told your father they needed to leave immediately. What did the men say to her? They told her that Cordero knew everything. They knew about the safe house, they knew about Diana. They knew the evidence was hidden in multiple locations. And they gave your mother a choice. Jason's throat was tight. What choice? Cordero's people had grabbed Diana that morning in Santa Fe. They had her. The message to your mother was simple. Surrender the evidence and Diana goes free. Keep running and Diana dies. But there was a third option. One Cordero offered as a gesture of mercy. He said your mother and the twins could disappear. Really disappear with new identities, money, protection. If Mark turned himself in and the evidence was destroyed. Cordero would let the family live. But Mark had to take the fall alone. Jason felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. My mother agreed to that? It wasn't that simple. Your mother didn't trust Cordero. But she also knew they were trapped. If they ran, Diana died. If Mark turned himself in, he'd be killed and the family would probably still be hunted down. So your mother did something desperate. Something I didn't learn about until years later. Weston pulled out another photograph. This one showed Jason's mother, Evelyn, standing with Diana Hartley outside a motel. They were close together, and Evelyn's hand was on Diana's arm. The body language suggested not just allies, but friends. Your mother and Diana had become close during the investigation. They'd spent weeks working together while your father was out taking photographs. Diana didn't have family. Her parents were dead. No siblings. Your mother saw how isolated she was, how much danger she was in. Weston paused. On July 11th, after those men approached your mother at the gas station, she made a decision. She called Diana from a payphone and told her to run. Told her to take the evidence and get out of New Mexico immediately. Diana refused. She said she wouldn't abandon the story or leave the Collins family in danger. So what happened? Your mother made a deal with Diana. Diana would agree to disappear with the Collins family. She'd become part of the family, essentially. They'd all vanish together, with new identities. But the evidence would still be released. Diana had arranged for copies to be sent to 3 different journalists with instructions to publish if she didn't check in within 2 weeks. It was insurance. Even if Cordero found the family, the story would still break. Jason tried to process this. So they all planned to disappear together? Yes, but it required perfect timing and cooperation. Your father was hesitant. He didn't want to run, wanted to fight. But your mother convinced him it was the only way to keep everyone safe, especially you boys. She reminded him that the story would still come out. Justice would still be served, they just wouldn't be around to see it. And Cordero found out about the plan. Not exactly. They almost made it work. Weston's expression grew darker. July 12, 1976. Your family met Diana at a rest stop outside Santa Rosa. The plan was to transfer to Diana's vehicle, leave your station wagon behind as misdirection, and drive to a small airport where a friend of Diana's would fly you all to Montana. From there, you'd disappear into Canada. You were hours away from making it. What went wrong? I did. Weston's voice cracked. I was following you. I'd been assigned to track your family, report your movements. I was young, stupid, thought I was doing my job. I didn't know what Cordero really intended. I called in your location. The silence in the diner was deafening. Even the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter seemed to fade away. You led them to us, Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. Weston looked directly at Jason, and there were tears in his eyes. 20 minutes after I called it in, 3 vehicles arrived. Sheriff Brennan, 2 of Cordero's men, and Agent Morrison. They surrounded you. I watched from a distance and I knew immediately I'd made a terrible mistake. This wasn't an arrest. This was an execution. Jason's hands gripped the edge of the table. Tell me what happened. All of it. Weston's voice shook. Your father tried to protect the family. He got between the men and your mother and you boys. Diana was already in her car, trying to pull away. They shot out her tires. Morrison grabbed you and your brother, held you while Brennan approached your father. He paused, his breathing labored. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw your mother screaming, trying to reach you boys. Diana got out of her car with her hands up. And then, your father did something I'll never forget. He looked directly at where I was hiding. Somehow he'd spotted me in the distance, and he shouted something. Just 3 words, loud enough for me to hear across the desert. What did he say? Protect my son. Weston's voice broke completely. Not sons, singular son. Jason felt ice in his veins. What does that mean? It means your father knew they weren't going to kill all of you. Cordero was many things, but he understood that murdering 2 7-year-old boys would bring heat he couldn't control. The FBI might be dirty, but the state police, other federal agencies, kids dying would trigger a real investigation. So your father was bargaining. He was trying to save at least one of you. Eli, Jason whispered. They took Eli. They took your father, your mother, and Eli. They put them in one of the vehicles and drove away. Diana was beaten unconscious and left beside her car. And you. Weston wiped his eyes with a shaking hand. You ran. You took off into the desert, and in the chaos you got away. Morrison tried to follow you, but it was getting dark and you were small and fast and terrified. By the time they got flashlights, you'd vanished into the brush. I don't remember any of this. You wouldn't. The mind protects itself from trauma. You wandered for 3 days. A trucker found you on a county road outside Amarillo. You couldn't tell them your name or what happened. Eventually, they matched you to the missing persons report, and your grandmother claimed you. Jason's entire body was shaking. Where did they take my family? What happened to my father and mother and Eli? Weston reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. This is what I've spent 34 years trying to atone for. I left the sheriff's department in 1979, but I never stopped investigating. I tracked down witnesses, followed paper trails, pressured people for information. It took decades, but I pieced together what happened. Jason unfolded the paper. It was a hand-drawn map showing a location southeast of Esperanza, near an abandoned mine site. Cordero owned that land, Weston said. He was developing it for a shopping complex, but the project stalled in 1977 after his death. The foundation was already poured when your family disappeared. 30 feet of concrete, reinforced steel, the perfect place to hide something permanently. The implication crashed over Jason like a wave. They're buried there, under the concrete. Your father and Eli, yes, I'm certain of it. Weston's voice was barely audible. Your mother. That's more complicated. What do you mean? The deal Cordero offered your mother was real, at least partially. She could disappear with one son if Mark and the other son stayed behind. It was his insurance policy. If the evidence was ever released, if anyone came asking questions, he'd claim Mark had run off with one of the twins and his mistress, Diana. The abandoned station wagon, the mysterious disappearance, it would all fit a narrative of a man running from justice. But my mother didn't take that deal. No. She refused to choose between her sons. She refused to abandon your father. So Cordero made the choice for her. Weston pulled out one final photograph. It was blurry, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed a woman standing on a residential street, older, gray-haired, but the bone structure was unmistakable. Jason's breath stopped. That's my mother. Taken in 2006 in Boise, Idaho. She's alive, Jason. They didn't kill her. They did give her a new identity, probably threatened that if she ever came back or spoke about what happened, you'd be killed. She's been living in silence for 34 years, believing it's the only way to keep you safe. Does she know I'm looking for her? Does she know about any of this? I don't know. I tracked her down 4 years ago, but I didn't approach her. I was afraid if Cordero's people were still watching, my contact would put her in danger. But now... Weston coughed. A deep, rattling sound. Cordero is dead. Morrison died in 2003. Sheriff Brennan had a heart attack in 1995. Most of the people involved in this are gone. The ones who are still alive are old men like me, dying with no power left. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know the truth. Because your father was a good man who died trying to expose corruption. Because your mother has lived in prison for 34 years, afraid to reclaim her life. And because... Weston's voice dropped to a whisper. Because I need you to forgive me. I'm dying, Mr. Collins. Stage 4 lung cancer, maybe 3 months left. I've carried this guilt for 34 years. I can't die without you knowing what I did and asking for forgiveness I don't deserve. Jason stared at the old man across from him. Part of him wanted to rage, to blame Weston for everything. But looking at the broken, dying man, he couldn't find the anger. Weston had been a pawn, just like everyone else. You said Diana was beaten and left alive, Jason said. What happened after that? She recovered physically, but the evidence she'd hidden was compromised. Cordero's people found 2 of the 3 locations where she'd stashed documents. The journalists she'd sent copies to were warned off, threatened, bribed. I don't know which. The story never ran. Diana tried to continue investigating, but without Mark, without the full evidence, she couldn't build a strong enough case. She became obsessed, reckless, started showing up drunk at city council meetings, accusing officials of murder. She was dismissed as unstable. And then they killed her. Yes, they made it look like the suicide of a depressed, alcoholic woman whose career had fallen apart. Very few people questioned it. Jason looked down at the map, at the location where his father and brother were buried. I'm going there, to the mine site. You won't find anything. The shopping complex was eventually built, then torn down in 2005 when the area was rezoned. There's a parking lot there now. 3 layers of asphalt over the original concrete foundation. Whatever evidence is buried there will stay buried. I don't care about evidence. I care about my family. Then go to Boise. Find your mother. She's living under the name Margaret Thornton. Works at a library on State Street. She's alone, Jason. No family, no friends who know her real history. She's been waiting 34 years to be free. Weston slid a piece of paper across the table with an address written on it. Let her know that it's finally safe. Let her know that her sacrifice wasn't meaningless. Jason took the paper, his hands trembling. What about Diana? You said she hid evidence in 3 locations and Cordero found 2 of them. What about the 3rd? A strange expression crossed Weston's face. That's the question I've been asking myself for 34 years. Diana was smart, paranoid even. She would have made sure at least one cache was somewhere completely unexpected, somewhere Cordero could never find it. He leaned forward. I think she hid it with someone she trusted absolutely, someone who wouldn't understand the importance of what they were hiding, which would make them safer. Who? Your grandmother, Ruth Collins. Jason felt the world shift again. My grandmother knew? I don't think she knew, if that makes sense. Diana and your mother were close. It's possible Diana gave your mother something for safekeeping, and your mother passed it to Ruth without explaining what it was. Your grandmother raised you, right? After you were found? Yes. Did she ever give you anything? A box of your parents' belongings, photos, documents? Jason thought of the box Michelle had brought him, the box his grandmother had told her to throw away. Yes, just this week. But I've been through everything in it. There was nothing about Diana's investigation. Are you sure? Diana was an investigative journalist. She knew how to hide information in plain sight. Weston's eyes were intense despite his frailty. Think. Was there anything unusual in that box? Anything that seemed out of place or didn't quite fit with the other contents? Jason mentally cataloged everything he'd found. The journal, the maps, the film canisters, the unsent letter to the FBI. And then he remembered. The tape recorder, the 3 cassette tapes. There were tapes, Jason said slowly. Old cassette tapes and a recorder. I assumed they were my father's recordings of interviews or surveillance. Have you listened to them? No, I don't have a cassette player. Weston actually smiled, though it was sad and tired. That's it. That's Diana's insurance policy. She would have recorded everything: interviews, confessions, evidence that couldn't be captured in photographs. If those tapes survived, if Cordero's people never found them because they were looking for documents and photos, you might have everything your father and Diana died to expose. Jason stood up, his heart racing. I need to go. I need to listen to those tapes. Wait. Weston reached out, grabbing Jason's wrist with surprising strength. You need to understand something. If those tapes contain what I think they do, and if you decide to release them, there will be consequences. The people directly involved might be dead or dying, but their families, their business partners, people who benefited from what they did, they're still out there. They won't want this story to come out even after all these years. I don't care. You should care. Because unlike your father, you know what they're capable of. You know they kill. You know they destroy lives. And you know they're patient enough to wait 34 years for loose ends to reveal themselves. Jason pulled his wrist free. My father died trying to tell this story. My brother died because someone decided his life was worthless compared to their profits. My mother has been living in fear for 3 decades. If there's a chance to finally expose what happened to give my family justice, I'm taking it, no matter the risk. Weston nodded slowly. I understand. Just be smart about it. Make copies of everything, send them to multiple people. Don't trust anyone connected to law enforcement in New Mexico. And whatever you do, don't go to that mine site alone. If anyone is still watching, that's where they'll expect you to show up. What about you? Are you in danger for meeting with me? I'm already dead, Mr. Collins. Cancer will kill me long before anyone else gets the chance. Weston struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope your mother gets to come home. And I hope... His voice broke. I hope someday you can forgive me for what I did to your family. Jason wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just nodded. Weston walked slowly toward the exit. At the door, he turned back. One more thing. When you find your mother, tell her. Tell her Diana never blamed her. Diana understood why she made the choices she did. I visited Diana in the hospital after they found her at the rest stop. She was barely conscious, but she kept repeating 2 words. Save Evelyn. Even after everything, she was trying to protect your mother. Then he was gone, disappearing into the New Mexico night. Jason sat alone in the booth, surrounded by photographs and revelations, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he'd learned. His father and brother were buried under a parking lot in Esperanza. His mother was alive in Boise, Idaho, living a lie, and somewhere in his apartment, 3 cassette tapes held the evidence that had cost so many people their lives. He looked at his watch. Just past midnight. He could be back in Phoenix by 4 a.m. He'd find a cassette player if he had to search every pawn shop and thrift store in the city. And then he'd decide what to do with the truth his father had died to reveal. As Jason stood to leave, Dolores the waitress approached with the check. Your friend already paid, she said, but he asked me to give you this. She handed Jason a business card. On it was printed, Attorney Michael Chen, Seattle, Washington, followed by a phone number. On the back, in Weston's shaky handwriting, if something happens to you, call him. He has instructions to release everything. Jason pocketed the card and walked out into the night. The air was cool now, the desert temperature dropping rapidly after sunset. He stood in the parking lot looking up at the stars, the same stars that had been shining the night his family disappeared. I'm going to finish what you started, Dad, Jason said to the darkness. I'm going to bring them all down, and I'm going to bring Mom home. He got in his car and started the long drive back to Phoenix, back to the tapes that held the key to everything. Behind him, in the Sunset Cafe, Dolores watched through the window as his taillights disappeared down Route 66. Then she picked up the phone behind the counter and dialed a number she'd memorized 40 years ago. A number she'd hoped she'd never have to call again. He knows, she said when someone answered. Frank told him everything. The voice on the other end was elderly, refined, and very, very cold. Where is he going? Back to Phoenix, to listen to the tapes. How unfortunate. I had hoped this would all stay buried where it belongs. A long pause. You know what needs to be done. Dolores closed her eyes. After all these years? They're ghosts, haunting mistakes from a different era. Let them rest. Ghosts can't testify, Dolores, but tape recordings can, and so can investigative journalists who ask the wrong questions. We handled this problem in 1976 and we'll handle it again now. Make the call. The line went dead. Dolores stood with the phone in her hand, looking out at the empty highway. She thought about Mark Collins, the earnest photographer with the gentle smile who'd stopped for coffee at this very diner in July 1976. She thought about his beautiful wife and their twin boys who'd eaten pie at the counter while their parents planned what they thought was their escape. She'd been working at the Sunset Cafe for 45 years. She'd seen a lot of people come and go along Route 66. She'd kept a lot of secrets, but tonight, for the first time in decades, she hesitated before making the call she'd been ordered to make. Maybe it was time for the secrets to stop. Maybe it was time for the truth, no matter the cost. Or maybe she was just too old to keep playing these games. Dolores put down the phone and walked to the back office. In a locked drawer, she kept a small address book, the only physical copy of certain contact numbers that officially didn't exist. She opened it to a page she hadn't looked at in 34 years. At the top of the page, written in her younger self's handwriting, Diana Hartley, emergency contact. Below it was a phone number, and below that, an address in Boise, Idaho, for someone named Margaret Thornton. Dolores had been the one who'd helped Evelyn Collins disappear. She'd been the one who'd driven her to Idaho, helped her establish her new identity, made sure she was safe. It was the only good thing Dolores had ever done in service of the network she'd worked for all these years. She picked up the phone again and dialed a different number. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, thick with sleep. Hello? Margaret, this is an old friend. You don't know me, but I helped you once a long time ago. You're in danger. Your son is in danger. You need to call him right now and tell him to run. Do you understand? A long silence. Then, in a voice raw with 3 decades of grief and fear, Jason? Yes, call him. Tell him to trust no one. Tell him they're still watching. Dolores paused. And tell him his mother is coming home. Jason's phone rang at 3:47 a.m. somewhere between Albuquerque and Phoenix. He almost didn't answer. Unknown number, middle of the night, bad combination. But something made him pick up. Jason. The voice was female, older, shaking. Jason, this is your mother. Jason nearly drove off the road. He jerked the wheel, pulling onto the shoulder as his heart hammered in his chest. What? Who is this? It's Evelyn, your mother. I know you don't remember me, but I just found out you were alive 3 hours ago. Jason's voice cracked. How did you get this number? A woman called me. She said you're in danger. She said they know you have the tapes and they're going to stop you from reaching Phoenix. Jason, you need to hide. You need to... Mom. The word felt strange in his mouth, unfamiliar after 34 years. Slow down. Who called you? What woman? I don't know her name. She said she helped me disappear in 1976. She said... Evelyn's voice broke completely. She said it's time to stop running. Time to tell the truth. But Jason, you don't understand what these people are capable of. I know exactly what they're capable of. I know about Dad. I know about Eli. The silence on the other end was devastating. When Evelyn spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Frank told you. Oh God, he told you everything. Not everything. I still don't understand why you agreed to leave me behind. I didn't agree to anything. Evelyn's voice rose, desperate and raw. They took your father and Eli right in front of me. They beat Diana unconscious. And then they grabbed you, Jason. Morrison had a gun to your head, and said if I didn't cooperate, he'd kill you right there. So I cooperated. I got in their car. I thought if I went with them, at least you'd be safe. Jason's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. But I ran. You did. Morrison was distracted for just a second and you bit his hand and ran. You were always fast, always brave. You disappeared into the desert and they couldn't find you in the dark. Morrison wanted to keep searching, but Cordero said no. He said one witness was acceptable. It would support the story of a family road trip gone wrong. But 2 witnesses, 2 survivors, that would be a problem. So they let me go. They thought you were 7 years old, traumatized, unlikely to remember details. They thought you were safe to leave alive. Evelyn's voice hardened. They were wrong. You remembered enough to start looking. And now they know you have Diana's tapes. Jason looked in his rearview mirror. The highway behind him was empty. Just darkness and distant headlights. How would they know that? Because someone has been watching all along, Jason. That's what you have to understand. This wasn't just about 1976. The corruption Diana and your father uncovered. It didn't end when they died. It evolved. New people took over. The network is still there, still operating, still protecting its secrets. Who's running it now? I don't know all the names. I've been hiding for 34 years, cut off from everything, but the woman who called me said there's someone still alive from the original network. Someone with enough power to order your death if you release those tapes. She said his name was... The line went dead. Mom? Mom? Jason looked at his phone. No signal. He was in one of the dead zones along I-40, miles from the nearest cell tower. His headlights illuminated an exit sign ahead. Meteor City Trading Post, 2 miles. Jason knew it. A tourist trap on the old Route 66, mostly abandoned now except for a gas station that stayed open 24 hours. He took the exit, his mind racing. If they knew about the tapes, if they were trying to stop him, they'd expect him to go straight to Phoenix. Maybe he should change plans, find somewhere to hide, somewhere to... That's when he saw the headlights in his rearview mirror. A single vehicle had taken the same exit, following about 200 yards back. In the pre-dawn darkness, Jason couldn't make out what kind of car it was, but it maintained the exact same distance, matching his speed. His pulse quickened. Could be nothing. Could be another driver heading to the gas station. But after everything he'd learned tonight, Jason didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The Meteor City Trading Post appeared ahead, a sprawling complex of connected buildings, most dark and empty, but the gas station on the corner was lit up like a beacon. Jason pulled in, parking under the lights near the entrance. He kept the engine running, watching his mirrors. The vehicle that had been following him drove past without slowing. It was a dark sedan, newer model, tinted windows. Jason couldn't see the driver. The car continued down the frontage road and disappeared into the darkness. Jason waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe... His phone buzzed with a text message. Signal must have returned, but the message wasn't from his mother. Unknown number. Go inside the trading post. Use the payphone in the back. It will ring in exactly 2 minutes. Answer it. Jason's blood ran cold. He looked around the parking lot. Empty except for his car and one semi-truck parked on the far side. Driver presumably sleeping. The gas station attendant was visible through the windows, scrolling on his phone behind the counter. Another text arrived. This is the only way you stay alive tonight. 2 minutes. Jason grabbed the envelope with the photographs and his father's journal, left his phone in the car, and walked into the trading post. The interior was a maze of dusty merchandise, Native American jewelry, Route 66 memorabilia, rocks and minerals, postcards from an era when people still sent postcards. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The attendant barely looked up. Help you? Just looking, Jason said, moving deeper into the store. He found the payphone in the back corner, next to the restrooms. It was an ancient thing, the kind he hadn't seen in years. The handset was intact and a dial tone hummed when he picked it up. 30 seconds later, the phone rang. Jason answered. Who is this? Someone who wants to help you, but you need to listen carefully because we don't have much time. The voice was male, middle-aged, calm. Right now there are 3 cars positioned along I-40 between here and Phoenix. If you get back on the highway, you won't make it home. They're going to stage an accident. Make it look like you fell asleep at the wheel. The tapes will disappear and this will all be over. How do I know you're not one of them? You don't. But I'm going to prove it to you. In the envelope you're carrying, there's a photograph of a gray Cadillac. Look at it. Jason pulled out the photos, found the one showing Cordero's Cadillac. I'm looking at it. Check the license plate. What are the last 3 digits? 447. That car belonged to Victor Cordero, but after he died in 1976, it was transferred to his son, Anthony Cordero. Anthony continued his father's business, expanded it. He's 72 years old now, retired, supposedly legitimate, but he's the one who ordered Frank Weston to meet with you. He wanted to know what you'd found, what you knew. Weston was working for him. Weston thought he was making amends. He didn't realize Anthony was using him to gather intelligence. When Weston reported back that you had the tapes, that you knew about Diana's evidence, Anthony activated old protocols. The waitress at the Sunset Cafe, Dolores Martinez, she's been on Anthony's payroll for 45 years. She reported your conversation. Jason felt sick. So Weston led me into a trap. No, Weston contacted me after he met with you. He realized what Anthony was planning and tried to warn me. That's why I'm calling you now. Weston died 2 hours ago. Heart attack in his truck, outside a motel in Moriarty. Official story will be natural causes, but I think they expedited his death once he'd served his purpose. Who are you? My name is David Chen. I'm the son of Michael Chen, the attorney whose card Weston gave you. My father has been collecting evidence about this case for 20 years, ever since Diana Hartley's sister hired him to investigate her death. When my father learned you'd started looking into your family's disappearance, he asked me to watch over you. I'm a private investigator, and I've been following you since yesterday. You've been following me? To protect you, and it's a good thing I was. That sedan that passed you a few minutes ago, that was one of Anthony's people, confirming your location. 2 more cars are waiting 7 miles west on I-40. If you'd kept driving, you'd be dead by dawn. Jason's legs felt weak. What do I do? First, you need to hide those tapes somewhere safe. Not your apartment. They'll search it. Not a bank. They have people who can access records. Somewhere unexpected. Somewhere they'd never look. Jason thought fast. I know a place. Good. Second, you need to get to Seattle. My father has everything ready. Media contacts, law enforcement he trusts, secure locations. If we can get you there safely, we can release the tapes and all of Diana's evidence simultaneously. The story will be too big to contain. What about my mother? They know about her now. We're already moving her. By the time you reach Seattle, she'll be there waiting for you. Protective custody, legitimate federal agents, she'll be safe. How do I get to Seattle if they're watching the highways? There's a cargo plane leaving from a private airstrip outside Flagstaff at 6 a.m. Medical supplies run, completely legitimate. The pilot owes me a favor. He'll take you as far as Portland, and we'll drive you the rest of the way. But you need to get to Flagstaff in the next 2 hours, and you can't take I-40. How else do I get there? Old Route 66, the original route, before they built the interstate. It's longer, slower, mostly abandoned, but they won't be watching it. Head north from here, take Forest Service Road 522 through the Kaibab National Forest. It's rough, but your car should make it. The airstrip is outside Williams. I'll text you the exact coordinates. Jason's mind was spinning. This sounds insane. It is insane, but it's the only way you survive the night. And Jason, when you hide those tapes, make sure it's somewhere meaningful, somewhere your father would have approved. He started this journey on Route 66. It seems fitting that the evidence should be hidden somewhere along the same route. The line went dead. Jason stood holding the payphone, trying to process everything. Frank Weston was dead. His mother was being moved into protective custody, and somewhere out there on the highway, people were waiting to kill him. He looked at the envelope in his hands, at his father's photographs and journal entries. 34 years ago, Mark Collins had driven Route 66 trying to expose the truth. Now Jason was being asked to finish that journey. He walked back through the trading post. past displays of turquoise jewelry and petrified wood, past vintage signs advertising gas for 39 cents a gallon. And then he saw it. A display case near the front, filled with time capsules. Sealed metal boxes that tourists could purchase, fill with memorabilia, and have the trading post store for future generations. Perfect. Jason bought one of the capsules and a padlock. The attendant barely looked at him, just rang up the sale and went back to his phone. Jason went to his car, opened the capsule, and carefully placed the 3 cassette tapes inside, along with copies of the most damning photographs and a note explaining everything he'd learned. He sealed it, locked it, and carried it back inside. "I'd like to have this stored," he told the attendant. "How long can you keep it?" The attendant shrugged. "Forever, basically. We got capsules from the 1970s in the back room. You want to put it in the permanent collection?" "Yes. And I want it registered under a specific name." Jason wrote on the form, "Time capsule for Eli Collins. To be opened only by family members or law enforcement with proper warrant. July 12, 2010. The date, the anniversary of his family's disappearance. The attendant stamped the form, gave Jason a receipt, and carried the capsule to the back room. Jason watched him place it on a shelf with dozens of others, a secret hidden in plain sight among tourist vacation memories. His father's evidence, Diana's recordings, the truth about what happened in 1976, all of it safe, waiting for the moment it could be released properly. Jason walked back to his car as the sky began to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. He had 2 hours to reach Flagstaff, to get on that cargo plane, to make it to Seattle where his mother was waiting. He pulled out of the parking lot, heading north onto the old Route 66, following the same path his father had driven 34 years ago. The road was cracked and faded, marked with signs from another era. Mother Road, the road of dreams and desperate journeys. Jason's phone buzzed one last time before he entered the dead zone. A text from an unknown number. "Your mother says to tell you she's proud of you, and she says your father would be too. Finish this, Jason. Bring them all down." The sun broke over the horizon, painting the desert gold and red. Jason drove into the light, following the road his father had died trying to protect, carrying forward the truth that had cost so many people everything. Behind him, somewhere in the darkness he was leaving behind, were the men who wanted him dead. Ahead, somewhere in the dawn he was driving toward, was justice. And hidden in a tourist trap on Route 66, sealed in a time capsule among forgotten souvenirs, was the evidence that would finally bring his family home. The road stretched ahead, endless and old, bearing witness to one more story in its long history of secrets and survivors. Jason pressed down on the accelerator and drove toward the future, toward his mother, toward the end of a journey that had begun 34 years ago on a summer day, when a family vanished and only the truth remained, waiting to be discovered. Route 66 had claimed his family in 1976. Now, in 2010, the road was finally ready to give them back.